Some of the best advice out there, especially about money, doesn't come from a fancy finance book. It comes from real life, from experience. Today, we're going to dive into this amazing piece of wisdom passed down from a grandfather. And trust me, it starts with a lesson that's, it's going to surprise you. Okay, so here it is, straight up. Never save money. Whoa, right? Now, hold on. This isn't about going on a wild spending spree. Not at all. It's actually the heart of a lesson learned the hard way, by a man who figured out that real security, true financial safety, isn't about just stuffing coins in a jar. So let's get into his story and see exactly how he learned that.
All right, so our story kicks off in this little farming village. And in this village, there's this one guy, and everyone knows him for being, let's just say he's lazy. He's not a farmer, he's not a craftsman. Nope, he's a professional dreamer, always talking about this big, bright future that just never seems to get here.
Oh, he had his catchphrases for sure. You'd find him sitting under this big tree, and he'd tell anyone who'd listen about the amazing shop he was going to open or the land and cows he was going to buy. And the best part? He was going to do it all without ever getting tired, without lifting a finger. But you know how these things go. The years just kept rolling by, and that one day of his, it never came. And pretty soon the villagers weren't laughing with him anymore. They were just feeling sorry for him.
Meanwhile, his wife, she was the voice of reason in all this. She'd always say, so quietly, life doesn't live on dreams. Life lives on work. She was trying to bring it back down to earth, to anchor all those high-flying plans. But what would he do? He'd just shrug it off. He was so sure that his easy way was just around the corner. And right there, you've got this central conflict, right? His fantasy world clashing with the cold, hard facts of reality.
So what does happen when a life built on nothing but dreams smacks right into the reality of an empty cupboard? Well, for our grandfather, the wake-up call wasn't a big dramatic event. It was just one single, simple question that finally made him face everything he'd been running from.
Picture this. It's late, and his grandson, this little kid, thin and barefoot, just quietly asks, "Grandpa, is there bread?" That's it. His wife goes to the cupboard, opens the door, and it's just empty. Completely bare. And in that moment, bam, the full weight of all his inaction, all his empty promises, it just comes crashing down on him. The silence in that little hut was deafening, heavier than any scolding could ever be.
And that was the light bulb moment, wasn't it? A really painful one. He realized you can't eat dreams. You can't fill your stomach with ideas. All those grand plans, they were totally useless when his family was hungry. And it was shame, pure shame, that finally pushed him to do what years and years of advice never could. The very next morning, he was out there, working as a day laborer in the fields.
And let me tell you, this work was brutal. The sun was just beating down, and his body, which had never known real labor, it ached all the time. He was finally earning some money, but it was like sand through his fingers, gone as fast as it came in. But then he overheard something he thought was the secret, the answer to all his problems. If you save, you are safe. He heard some men say it at the village store, and those words just stuck in his head. Saving, that was it. It sounded like the magic word he'd been waiting for his whole life. So that very night, he finds this big glass jar, shoves it under his bed, and just like that, it becomes his new dream. But this dream, it was a symbol of some seriously false hope. When his grandson asked what the jar was, he said, "That's our tomorrow." But here's the thing. Paying for that tomorrow was costing them dearly today. The whole family started eating less. Getting new shoes? Forget about it, even when their old ones were falling apart. Every single spare coin went clinking into that jar. And that sound, it was a temporary comfort, sure, but it couldn't drown out the sound of their own rumbling stomachs. So after months and months of this sacrifice, the jar is finally full. He's so proud. He lugs it all the way to the market, ready to buy 3 big sacks of corn for his family. But when he gets there, the seller counts out all the coins and just shakes his head. Prices had gone up. All that money he'd saved could now only buy 1.5 sacks, half of what he expected.
The seller's words were so simple, so blunt, and absolutely crushing. He realized that the money he'd worked so hard for, the coins he'd sacrificed to protect, they'd been silently losing their power the whole time he was saving them. Walking home that day, that heavy jar didn't feel like security anymore. It just felt heavy, like he was carrying a monument to his own failure.
At this point, he's just defeated, totally lost. He feels like there's no way out.
But real wisdom doesn't always show up as some grand new plan. Sometimes it comes from finally listening to that small voice you've been ignoring all along.
And he suddenly remembered something his grandson had said a long, long time ago, an idea he had just brushed off at the time. But now, with the sting of that failed jar still fresh, he listened. He took the last little bit of money he had, and instead of hiding it, instead of saving it, he invested it. He went out and bought a few scrawny chickens.
See, he didn't just spend the money, he put it into what his grandson called an egg factory. And it was brilliant in its simplicity. It was a living, breathing cycle. You buy chickens, right? They give you eggs. You eat some eggs, you sell the rest. Then you take that money and you buy more chickens. You just repeat the process. The whole thing was alive. It was growing. It was the total opposite of those dead, static coins sitting in that jar.
And this simple idea changed everything. Before long, their little yard was full of clucking chickens. Neighbors started stopping by to buy fresh eggs. And for the very first time in his life, the grandfather felt that deep satisfaction that comes from productive work. It was out of this whole experience that he learned his greatest lesson.
And when you look at it, the difference is just crystal clear, isn't it? The jar, that was static wealth. It's just money sitting there quietly losing its value to inflation, making you anxious. But the chickens, they were a growing asset. They were actually producing value. They were feeding his family, and they were multiplying. They were alive.
And one day, holding a simple, warm egg in his hand, he looked at his grandson and had this huge epiphany. He finally got it. Real wealth isn't a pile of coins hidden under a bed. It's a system, something that actually generates value. In that moment, he wasn't a lazy dreamer anymore. He was a wise provider. And that became the big lesson, the advice he shared with absolutely everyone. He'd just point to his flock of chickens, clucking away, as his living proof. He'd say, saving money is like trying to hold water in your hands. It just slips away. Instead, make it work for you. Put it into something that grows, even if you have to start small. Turn it into an asset that produces.
So, this grandfather's story really leaves us with a huge question to think about for our own lives. When you look at your own money, your own resources, is it just sitting still in a glass jar somewhere, slowly losing its punch? Or have you found your chickens? Have you found those assets that are actively working for you, growing, and building a truly secure future?